Welcome, my fellow Dawi, to the showdown between the Dwarves, who shall be led by a Rune Lord, and the Warriors of Chaos, who are going to be helmed by Sarthoriel, the Dark Herald of the KFC Gods. So as far as the build goes, there's going to be a lot of guns, and I feel like that's the way to play the Dwarves, but of course, in the true Adawi fashion, we are indeed going to have many layers to this glorious onion. So as far as the build goes, the first layer of defense here is going to be the Miners with Blasting Charges. These guys are pretty good up front. They have okay AP value, so if they have to fight elite Chaos Infantry like Chosen or Chaos Warriors, they're going to get massacred for sure, but they're going to be able to put a dent in those guys and maybe come back in the late game with like a rear charge or something. And, they're pretty solid units against Chaos. On top of that, the Blasting Charges are quite good against Marauders because there is a kind of school of thought with Chaos play against Dwarves where you bring like cheap infantry. So you just bring like Marauders with great weapons and Chaos Marauders. You get just a ton of Chariots and a couple other big threats. So, all in all, I think the Miners with Blasting Charges are a pretty decent pick. So we got 3 of those in the front line, going to be taking a beating for the Ancestor Gods. And on top of that, in the secondary line, we have Dwarf Warriors with great weapons. And really, I don't think you need much more than that. Dwarf Warriors with great weapons with Thunder support plus Runes of Wrath and Rune can honestly hang with even the most elite Chaos Infantry. And obviously, it's not going to be pretty for them, but if you have the Thunders kind of shooting, the Runes of Wrath and Rune kind of slowing them as they advance, getting more fire, basically you just want to make sure you can soften up Chaos Warriors with great weapons and Chosen before they get close to you. And from there, the Dwarf Warriors with great weapons can do an okay job. So in total, we got 4 of those bad boys, or actually 5. So it's going to be 4 here in the front row, 1 here in the back. And for our firing line, we do have 4 Thunders. And these guys are the MVPs in this matchup. They can deal with Chariots relatively effectively. It's still really hard. And I think that this is a matchup that does favor Chaos and pretty much any of those factions that have really good Chariots and kind of AP infantry. But nonetheless, these are one of your tools. The Thunders, they hit hard. They have a pretty good arcs, well, not arcs of fire, but I guess kind of line of sight. It's just like, it's hard to juke it. So for example, if there's like a Chariot trying to juke like bow units, for example, it's going to be much easier for them to dodge it. Whereas the Thunders, it's like packs a really hard direct punch, and it's very hard to kind of juke those out. So we have 4 of those bad boys, going to be using them to bring down all the foul beasts that the Warriors of Chaos have brought today. And this is a ladder game, so it's not going to be obviously under the same tournament rules, because in tournaments, typically you wouldn't be able to bring like 3 single entities. And he has 1, 2, 3, 4, and I think the Warp Chicken would count as 1 as well. So, it looks like 5 there, but anyway, so definitely some very wild stuff going on today. And now in between the guns, and with Dwarves, positioning is super important. Obviously you can bring any army composition you want, but if your positioning isn't good with the Dawi, you're going to have a really bad time. So we have Dragonback Slayers, and then we have Giant Slayers over here on the far side. So you'll notice kind of how our formation works. So here on the sides, we have the Giant Slayers who are essentially covering any pressure from over here or over here. They're in between the 2 guns, and the same thing on the other side as well. Dragonback Slayers are covering here, and they have really good kind of spatial control, which I think is quite solid. Granted, it's going to be, especially based on what my opponent brought, very difficult to kind of protect everything, but you're going to have to make some concessions, but even still, we'll try our best. Rune Lord with the Rune of Wrath and Ruin, or the Bastard Rune of Wrath and Ruin, and a Runesmith as well. Now in the back, we have a Cannon. Cannon's pretty good. I'm just guarding it with Miners because, I don't know, I could put some Slayers back there, but I feel like the Slayers are much more necessary, like over here in this part of the battlefield, so hopefully these bad boys will be able to do the trick. So for my opponent's army, he's got the Warp Chicken. Looks like he has Searing Doom, which is pretty good against Dwarves. It does some decent AoE damage against blobbed up infantry. Marauders into the Sunset, and like I said, he's going for that other school of thought, which is just going to be a ton of big monsters. So 3 Feral Manticores, 2 Exalted Heroes, no, just 1 Exalted Hero. It looks like, 2 Feral Manticores, a bunch of Trolls. So it looks like they're going to be unarmored, which is probably fine. Dwarves have a ton of AP anyways on their guns, so I guess just paying for the armor isn't really necessary. So it's going to be 4 Chaos Trolls, and of course one of the better picks he has against Dwarves is going to be 2 Chaos Chariots. And Chariots are the bane of the Dwarves. If used effectively, those things are just an absolute terror in the night. So that's pretty much it for his force. Warp Chicken is going to be coming in, absorbing some firepower right away, and that is it. So let's get this show on the road, guys, and have some fun. So firstly, I'm going to be screening out with my Lords and my Dragonback Slayers. So they're going to be scooting up. The Chicken is going to take a little bit of poke from the guns, and obviously you could save some ammo by not shooting him, but I think it's worth it. That amount of HP does matter in the course of a long, grindy game. So in the front, the Miners with Blasting Charges are going to be taking a beating for sure, but this is their job. I'd rather have Warp Chicken and this Exalted Hero, for example, jumping over here and causing problems than, doing actual issues here in my back line. Over here on the flank, there's going to be some Chariot pressure coming in. So the Chaos Chariot and the Manticore are thinking about jumping in, but a little bit of a lapse of micro there, and the Cannon takes a ton of firepower. So there's a Cannon shooting it, there's a Dwarven Thunder shooting it. I'm going to be screening with Miners, and I do also have the Giant Slayers kind of ready to intercept this. So the Chariots, to me, are the biggest threat, so I'm really going to be focusing those guys down. Now, the main fighting is underway. The first line of the Miners have fallen. Now the more elite Dwarf troops are going to be coming in. So Dwarf Warriors are piling in, Dragonback Slayers are piling in, Thunders are getting some pretty nice shots downtown to the Chaos Trolls, and over here we're pretty much able to secure this position. That Chariot's offline, Giant Slayers did a good job, and I do have this gun line here that's still in relatively good shape. 1 Manticore is going to be going for the back, trying to shut down my Cannon, which probably isn't a bad idea, and on the far side you can see the Manticores and Trolls are just kind of swarming in every which direction. So certainly very tough to protect everything, like I said, especially with this many single entities, and these guys are going to be jumping on the Thunders, and they're going to be temporarily shut down. But in the center we have a good fight. You can see the Dragonback Slayers have gotten amongst Trolls. We have the Runesmith and the Rune Lord kind of holding those guys back, and our Dwarven Infantry, based on what he brought, which is just Chaos Marauders, are holding relatively well, so quite happy about that. But at this point, I realized there's a pretty big flank overload here. He has a lot of stuff over here and on this side of the battlefield, and rotating over here to protect this would just be too hard. So I'm like, okay, what I'm going to do is get my Thunders here and here. I'm going to put one here and one here. Hopefully you guys can see my mouse. And I'm going to form a new battle line like across this line right here, which is going to be good because I have all my Slayers in position to kind of protect this area of the battlefield, and it's going to be very tough for my opponent to deal with that. Now, the Manscore has been trying to shut down the cannon. The Miners have been doing a pretty good job kind of distracting it. And the Dwarven cannon, I keep making sure to put it in guard mode so it keeps shooting regardless of being attacked. And it's still shooting in and doing some pretty good damage against high-value targets. Trolls are being taken apart by the Troll Slayers, and yeah, as you would expect. And yeah, Chaos Trolls here are shattering. Dwarf Warriors in the front are actually winning their fights against Chaos Marauders. Their armor is really helpful. And look at these Miners here, actually holding back a tide of Chaos Trolls. Quite proud of those guys. So we do finish off the second chariot, so there's no more chariots online. The Warp Chicken back here is trying to get on my guns, but I have really, really good support back here. The Giant Slayers are able to kind of chase him down, and he's going to be drumsticking away into some of my other weaker areas. So Giant Slayer still chasing. Looks like Serum Doom is going to be going down, so good caster for my opponent, but my gun line is partially back online, so I did pretty much lose two of my Thunders over here. One group really just got pounded out, and the other one I think is just fully compromised, but I was able to get really good value on the other side of the battlefield. So these Chaos Trolls are offline. I have a healthy gun line now, and if he wants to press my gun line at this point, I have Dragonback Slayers, I have Giant Slayers here, and we're most certainly going to be able to peel those guys. So it looks like there's a Feral Manscore coming in, which the Dragonback Slayers are ready to take down. So they're going to be going after the Manscore here. Warp Chicken is coming in as well, but there's Giant Slayers just hot on his KFC drumstick, and they're most certainly going to be able to kind of hold him back. Rune Lord and Runesmith are coming back as well, and you can see the infantry for Chaos has been faltering. Chaos Marauders are losing their fights across the board to the Dwarf Warriors, and the Trolls are actually getting kind of held back by the Miners, which is pretty hilarious. So you gotta give those Dwarfs props. And Miners, as far as like the chaff unit goes, they have terrible leadership. Not leadership, excuse me. They have terrible combat stats, but they have good leadership and good armor values. So they're going to be able to kind of hold up surprisingly long for their cost. So the Trolls are trying to surge back here to shut down the cannon and another group of Thunders, and you can see the Dwarf Warriors have intercepted them. Blasting charges coming in, and the gun line is actually firing at the Trolls relatively effectively. But this is really the big epicenter back here. You can see Sartorial the Everchicken trying to get back here, but everywhere he goes, he's taking crossfire, he's being attacked by Giant Slayers, and the other Manticore did rampage and was actually just annihilated here by the Dragonback Slayers. So those proud Dawi making the ancestors sing, doing a great job here, and now they're going to be maybe surging in here. I think we actually rear charged these Trolls here, who are actually still fighting these Miners. Pretty incredible stuff. I can't believe how long this guy's held. But the guns are back online. Warp Chicken's trying his best here, but he's just being taken apart. Giant Slayers hit incredibly hard, and Warp Chicken is going to be going quietly into the night, and you can see the bounce power was just massively in my favor at that point. It was about 75%, so my opponent did withdraw, because, I mean, everything here is pretty much shattering. You can see all his Trolls here in mass route. He has like a Manticore left. I have a ton of infantry. I have my guns, and my two Slayers are pretty much perfect health, as well as my leadership kit. So, well played. It was a fun game for sure. You know, his build, I'm so used to playing, like, you know, typically I'll grab people from the tournament Discord to get replays, but today I decided to go on ladder, so it kind of been a while since I played like a ladder build. I was just using a ton of ridiculous stuff like the triple Manscore, Exalted Hero, Chariots, Trolls. I mean, that's actually pretty scary for sure. That's a lot of pressure that's like, you know, relatively hard to deal with, because the Thunders, you know, you need them to deal with the Chariots, but then there's Trolls coming in, there's Manscores coming in, just all sorts of nasty stuff, and it really stretched my Slayers thin for sure. But when we were able to kind of realize, and that's a big thing about playing Dwarves, sometimes you have to realize when a position's lost and you have to like reform your ranks elsewhere, and we were able to reform our ranks, get a good firing line with those two Thunders. Our cannon shot for most of the game, and the Slayers were able to just tear apart countless Trolls. Even though their kills didn't reflect it, these guys did a ton of HP damage to the Chicken, to the Manticores, like to Trolls, to Chariots, but obviously a lot of their kills probably were on single entities, which is pretty good for those bad boys. But yeah, I feel like it's a pretty good Dwarf build. This is like my standard Dwarf build against Chaos. I've had really good success with it against you know, high-level tournament players, and it's done very well for me. Now, it's still a matchup that very heavily favors Chaos, I think. I think that Dwarves have a really bad matchup versus Chaos. I think Norska is a pretty bad matchup as well, because it basically has like just Chariots and, you know, the same kind of thing. They also have a pretty bad matchup versus Beastmen with like Razorgore herds and Razorgore chariots, and like, you know, anyone that really has that kind of decent AP infantry with chariot play is really, really hard for Dwarves to handle, especially if they like time their alpha strikes really well. But you know, a build like this, it certainly can threaten the Dwarves, and it has potential for sure. Like, if you're not a super experienced Dwarf player who's used to playing against chariots on a lot of pressure like this, like a build like this could crumple you very quickly. But if you're going to be going Chaos against Dwarves, I think bringing sustainable infantry is really important, because if your monsters get shut down, you have the advantage in the infantry game as well. So why not really take advantage of that? Because Chaos Warriors with great opens and troops like that do a really good job. So on that note, guys, let us go ahead and take a look at a Chaos build for anyone who plays Chaos out there. And I'll show you a Chaos build that I've had success with against Dwarves. It's certainly very tough to handle. So let's go over to Chaos. Chaos calls the Dark Gods. Warp Chicken's pretty good, honestly. I think Warp Chicken is still one of the better choices. Final Transmutation can be okay, but I do think Plague of Rust and Searing Doom and all these things like this are pretty good. So I would honestly just probably go with this kit. Plague of Rust can be helpful if like you have like Marauders or Sartorial himself, who doesn't have the best AP. Lowering the armor of the Dwarf Lords and stuff is really useful, but he's just like a massive annoying distracting Carnifex. So I probably bring like 3 Chaos Warriors with great weapons and then like 4 Marauders just to kind of wrap around the flanks. The Chaos Warriors will hammer up the center and they're going to be taking a beating for sure. But I mean, you need to time your Alpha Strike like to be very, very like just unified, just like a hard push in there. So I would probably get like, 3 or 4 Chariots even. I mean, that's going to be really, really annoying for your opponent to deal with here. So you get those, I don't know, 3 or 4. It depends on your micro. Like if you can micro 4 effectively, then by all means. On top of that, you want to get 1 Feral Manscore, not 3 probably. The 1 Feral Manscore is really good at chasing down friggin' gyrocopters. Like some dwarf players like to have like boxes with gyrocopters and things like that, and getting that is pretty good. And on that note, that reminds me, a final transmutation might not be bad because if they do go with like a noob box and have like the the hammers like in the rune breakers or iron breakers, like being able to get a huge final transmutation on them can be extremely punishing. So I mean, honestly, even getting like a dragon, like that's like a bit of a hard counter against that style of play. But I think that Sartorial here, or Purple Sun. I mean, Purple Sun would be really good against the box too. I'm just trying to like respect all the Dwarven styles of play and see what would you really need to account for. One thing I'm actually a big fan of is getting the Demon Spew and just using them on the flank. It's a bit of a weird thing, and I think most people would probably disagree with me, but I like the Demon Spew for pressuring the flank, and then what you do is you use the Plague of Rust on whatever they're fighting, and they'll tear it to shreds. Normal Forsaken have pretty low combat stats, but these guys do have the melee attack debuff for the late game, and plus they hit pretty hard against light armor. So what you do is you just Plague of Rust their target, and it can be pretty nasty. They can chew through a lot of stuff, like even elite stuff, like hammers, if you do get that Plague of Rust off. So far, so good. I think we might need more great weapons. We have, the Manticore to chase down the Air Force. As far as like big monsters go, I'm not a huge fan. I think I just prefer to use the infantry and chariots. It seems to be a little bit more steady. I mean, there's a multitude of ways you can play. You don't really want to bring hell cannons because dwarves do have typically bring 1 cannon themselves, and it's really, really good against them. You can get like chosen with great weapons. I don't like to get like too expensive in the infantry game because it gives the dwarves like good targets. And I think just maxing out on like Chaos Warriors with great weapons and getting like freaking 5 of those guys just going deep is going to be good. And here, cut 1 Marauder probably and get some Poison Hounds just to chase off routing units. I'm almost tempted to get another group of Poison Hounds. It might be a little bit better. Like, because what you do, the Poison Hounds can actually attack Slayers really effectively, and then you like muck them up with your infantry. The best case scenario is actually getting the Demon Spew on top of Slayers. They're so good against Slayers. They lower their melee attack. They have 75 armor against the low AP of Slayers. They hit like trucks. They'll tear Slayers to shreds. It's a pretty good trade for those guys. Yeah, something like this would be my 2 cents. So again, guys, hopefully you enjoyed this Dwarf vs. Chaos game, and we'll see you on the other side. Take care.